The wind at the harbor construction site was harsh enough to make your eyes water. But that was not why Sarah was shaking. She stood there in her hard hat, watching the lead contractor tear her safety report right down the middle. The sound of the tearing paper felt incredibly loud, over the noise of the heavy machinery. He let the pieces blow away into the deep foundation trench. "You worry way too much, sweetheart," he sneered, tossing the heavy clipboard back at her. "This foundation is perfectly fine, and we are going to pour the concrete tomorrow morning." Sarah knew with absolute certainty that it was not fine. The load-bearing calculations were deeply compromised. If they built on it, the entire East Wing could collapse within a decade, risking hundreds of lives. She tried to speak, to assert her authority as the chief architect, but before she could find her voice, a man stepped out from the deep shadows of the guard shack. It was Julian, the night security guard. He was wearing a faded, high-visibility vest that had seen years of hard weather. He walked over, picked up the torn clipboard, and pulled a carpenter's pencil from behind his ear. Without hesitating, he drew one single sharp line across the remaining blueprint. "You pour that concrete tomorrow, and the shear stress on this exact point will fracture the rebar before you even reach the second floor," Julian said. His voice was completely calm, not a single trace of anger or hesitation in it. The contractor opened his mouth to yell at him, his face turning bright red. But a sleek black town car suddenly pulled up to the site. The city inspector stepped out, flanked by two serious-looking aides. He walked straight up to the group and took one look at the corrected blueprint in Julian's hands. He nodded, with deep, unexpected respect. "Ah, you must be the new senior structural consultant the board sent over," the inspector said, offering his hand. "That is a brilliant catch on that shear stress." Sarah looked at Julian, her heart hammering violently in her chest. Julian looked back at her, his expression entirely unreadable. Instead of correcting the inspector and ruining the moment, Sarah simply smiled and nodded. "Yes, he is," she said confidently. "Before we go any further into this story, I want to ask you something very important. Have you ever been judged by the clothes on your back or the title on your badge, even when you knew exactly what you were capable of? If you have ever had to fight to protect the people you love, I want you to leave a comment down below right now. Write, "I boldly step forward, protect my family, and never back down." Let that be your absolute promise to yourself today. Now, to understand why Sarah took that massive risk, you have to understand the terrible corner she was backed into. She was the chief architect of the city's massive new maritime museum. It was a project that was supposed to define her entire career. Instead, it had quickly become a living nightmare. The board of directors was constantly pressuring her to cut costs. The contractor was cutting corners at every single turn to line his own pockets. She felt completely alone, suffocating under the crushing weight of expectations. Julian's world, on the other hand, was entirely different. He did not care about corporate ladders, board meetings, or multi-million-dollar contracts. His entire universe revolved around a small, quiet life, and his 7-year-old daughter, Mia. Behind his tiny, cramped guard shack, Julian had built a small wooden planter box and a tiny pond. It was a humble little garden where they grew tomatoes, raised a few fish, and found peace together. Every evening before his long shift started, you could find him kneeling in the dirt with Mia. He would patiently teach her how to pull weeds and water the fragile sprouts. A strong building needs a good foundation. "Right, Dad?" Mia asked one afternoon, patting the soil with her small, muddy hands. "That is exactly right, sweetie," Julian replied, smiling warmly at her. "And a good life needs a lot of patience and a willingness to learn quickly from your mistakes." He was teaching her the kind of things that no school ever could. But the corrupt contractor absolutely hated Julian. He hated the quiet, observing way the security guard looked at the construction site. It was almost as if Julian saw things that nobody else did. One evening, the contractor walked past the guard shack and deliberately kicked a bucket of soil over. The heavy dirt spilled everywhere, narrowly missing Mia's little shoes. "Get this disgusting mess cleaned up immediately." "Watchman," the contractor spat. You are paid minimum wage to open the gate, not to play farmer on my time." Julian did not yell back, and he did not clench his fists in anger. He simply reached out and placed his large, calloused hands over Mia's ears. He did not want her to hear the venom and hatred in the man's voice. Julian looked up at the contractor with a quiet, devastating sense of pity. He knew that true power did not come from shouting at people who had less than you. Later that night, the construction site was completely empty, silent, except for the low hum of the generator. Sarah was sitting alone in her field office, aggressively rubbing her temples. She was desperately trying to find a legal loophole to stop the dangerous concrete pour. She needed a break from the paperwork. So she walked out into the cool night air. As she walked past the guard shack, she noticed Julian sitting under the dim yellow light. He was not reading a magazine, and he was not listening to the radio. He was writing furiously on the back of a discarded incident report. Sarah stepped closer, quietly looking over his broad shoulder. Her breath caught sharply in her throat. He was not just doodling to pass the time. Julian was mapping out highly complex structural algorithms. He was calculating dead loads and seismic resistance with absolutely flawless precision. It was the kind of high-level mathematics that only a handful of senior engineers in the state could even understand. "Who are you?" Sarah whispered into the quiet night. Julian quickly covered the paper, his calm demeanor slipping for just a fraction of a second. "I am just a guy making sure the gate stays locked, ma'am," he replied quietly, avoiding her eyes. "But massive secrets like that do not stay buried for long." The very next morning, the contractor barged into the field office with a triumphant, evil smirk on his face. He had illegally run a background check on the license plates in the parking lot. He had figured the whole thing out. "Your genius consultant is a total fraud," the contractor sneered, aggressively throwing a manila folder onto Sarah's desk. "He is a nobody, a pathetic night watchman who probably did not even finish community college." He leaned over her desk, his eyes incredibly dark with malice and greed. "I already called the city council this morning. I told them that you let an unlicensed, uneducated security guard alter the official blueprints. They are holding an emergency disciplinary hearing at noon. They are going to strip your license, fire you, and I get to pour my concrete anyway." Sarah felt the floor completely drop out from under her feet. Everything she had worked for her entire life was about to be destroyed in an instant. Sometimes, doing the right thing feels exactly like stepping off a cliff in the dark. But if you believe in standing up to bullies, I need you to declare it right now. Scroll down into the comments and write, "I boldly step forward, protect my family, and never back down." At exactly noon, the city council boardroom was dead silent. Sarah sat alone at the long mahogany table, staring at her shaking hands. Across from her, the lead contractor was glowing with smug satisfaction. He had already passed out his fake reports to the board members. The head of the council cleared his throat and looked at Sarah with deep disappointment. "Miss Whitfield, allowing an uncredentialed security guard to alter structural blueprints is a massive violation of city code," he said coldly. "We have no choice but to terminate your contract and revoke your license immediately." Sarah opened her mouth to defend herself, but there was a loud knock on the heavy oak doors. The doors swung open, and Julian walked into the room. He was not wearing his faded high-visibility vest this time. He wore a simple, clean button-down shirt and a pair of worn-in jeans. He did not look angry, and he did not look intimidated by the expensive room. He walked straight to the table and set down a thick, weathered leather notebook. Right next to it, he placed a stack of material delivery receipts pulled from the site's trash. "You can fire her if you want, but she is the only person who actually read the math," Julian said evenly. The contractor slammed his fist on the table and stood up. "Security, get this guy out of here right now," he yelled. But one of the older board members had already opened Julian's notebook. The man adjusted his glasses, his face going pale as he stared at the hand-drawn algorithms. He looked up at Julian, then back down at the paper. "I know these load-bearing equations," the older man whispered in absolute shock. There are maybe 3 people on the entire East Coast who calculate shear stress this way, and one of them disappeared 4 years ago. The board member stood up, pointing a shaky finger at Julian. You are Julian Vance. The contractor laughed nervously, looking around the room. He is a glorified mall cop who works the graveyard shift for $12 an hour. The contractor scoffed. No, he is not. The board member interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. Julian Vance was the chief engineer for the state's largest infrastructure firm. He designed the very building we are sitting in right now. The entire room went completely still. Julian did not smile, and he did not gloat. He just looked at the contractor, with that same calm, quiet pity. I left the industry 4 years ago, because I realized I was spending 80 hours a week building monuments, while my own daughter was growing up without a father. Julian explained softly. I wanted a quiet life. But I will not sit by and let a greedy man build a tomb, just to save a few dollars on concrete. Julian tapped the delivery receipts on the table. He has been ordering grade 3 rebar and billing the city for grade 1. If you pour that foundation tomorrow, the entire East Wing will collapse within a decade. The math was absolute, flawless, and undeniable. The smug look completely melted off the contractor's face, replaced by pure panic. By the end of the hour, the contractor was being escorted out of the building to face a massive fraud investigation. Sarah kept her license, her job, and her dignity. The council practically begged Julian to come back as the new lead director of engineering. They offered him a ridiculous salary, a corner office, and a company car. Julian politely declined the offer, without even thinking about it. He agreed to stay on as a part-time consultant to help Sarah finish the museum, but only on one strict condition. He left work every single day at exactly 3 o'clock to pick up Mia from school. A week later, the construction site was finally moving forward the right way. Sarah walked past the guard shack after a long, productive day. She took off her expensive hard hat and kicked off her heavy work boots. She knelt down in the dirt next to Julian and Mia, helping them plant a new row of cherry tomatoes. She finally realized that true power does not come from a fancy title or a corner office. It comes from knowing exactly what truly matters in life, and having the courage to protect it. If you believe that family always comes first, and that real heroes do not always wear suits, I need you to do 2 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button to join our community of people who value hard work and integrity. And second, drop down into the comments and declare it one last time. Right. I boldly step forward, protect my family, and never back down. Stay strong, keep building your foundation, and I will see you in the next story.